Today let's talk about elemental combos, status effects, and crowd control. Now let's start off things by saying that in order to make elemental combos, first you have to have a combo starter. This sounds complicated, but basically, water makes enemies drenched, oil makes enemies oiled, and poison makes enemies poisoned. By themselves, these don't do a whole lot, but when combined with another element, can make elemental combos, which those can be very powerful. The first elemental combo let's talk about is Ignite. Ignite happens when the enemy is oiled and then takes fire damage. Ignite causes the enemy to take 25% more damage from all sources while they are on fire. And something important to note about this is that something like Burning Strikes, which does fire damage over time, it says it burns the enemy. This is burn. This is not ignite. The game treats these two things separately. However, this can still proc ignite if the target takes oil damage some other way. Up next to talk about is Petrify. Petrify happens when a poisoned enemy takes earth damage. The stun is approximately 6 seconds, and it does have diminishing return. What does that mean? The more times that they take the Petrify status effect, the less it actually does. For example, here, if you watch this guy, you can see that he starts off being frozen for a little while, and the more times he's hit, all of a sudden, it will just kind of ramp up very quickly to where he will not be petrified for very long at a time. Next up is Freeze, a 4-second stun with diminishing returns that also slows down enemies by 40% for 2 seconds after the stun. Freeze happens when you combine water and frost. Note this cannot affect frost enemies such as frost goblins or frost orcs. And because water is so special, not only can it freeze with frost, but it can electrocute with storm, causing a 6-second stun that also has diminishing return. Next, let's talk about Shatter. This is the hardest one to actually have apply, but it is a 2.5-second stun that slows enemies by 40% for 2 seconds after the stun ends. This is caused when a frozen enemy takes earth damage. The earth damage that actually provides the shatter effect will do 50% more damage, and this does not have diminishing returns. However, like I said, this is probably the hardest one to do. Okay, and so the last thing I want to talk about is that you can get mods for your relics that attune the tower to a specific element, and it works for towers that are not already attuned to an element. So for example, on the Huntress, the Poison Dart Tower automatically does poison damage. And for any tower that automatically does an elemental damage, you cannot change the element that it does. But on the Squire, the Cannonball Tower does not do any elemental damage, which means that you can put a relic on here with a mod with something, say, earth damage, and it will make it so that this tower is now attuned to earth damage, and so it does earth damage. And you can use that to make elemental combos. Another thing that you can do, if you really like the Squire's Cannonball Towers, you can make a second Squire with a poison servo on his Cannonball Tower. And then when you build Cannonball Towers with this knight, these ones will do poison, these ones will do earth, and together they can make the Petrify combo. Now, before we end the video, there's just a few more status effects I want to talk about. These are not combination status effects, they just are what they are. The one on screen now is Chilled, and this slows down enemies. This is just nice for those weekly challenges that require you to do this. Next would be Taunt. And if you look above their head, they have that little squiggly thing above them. That means that they are taunted to you and that they will only attack you. Then there's also Confuse, the squiggly with the red around it, and this will cause enemies to attack themselves. And finally, let's talk about Knock Up and Knock Back. Quite simply, these knock up and knock back enemies. Knock Up does have diminishing returns, and as you can see, enemies will get knocked up at the start, but then as they get closer to the end, they will no longer be getting knocked up. However, knock back does not have diminishing returns, but is much harder to actually do. So thank you for watching the video. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.